Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy.
You're going to have to ask yourself a couple of questions by the end of the program. Why would our schools leave all of this history out? I mean, this is some of the greatest American story that you've ever heard.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to share my experience, and I hope that all of you guys take it as a bit of a warning. I'm studying mathematics in college, and one day I hope to be a teacher, and so part of my study means that I'm studying a lot of courses on how to teach. In my courses on how to teach mathematics, which is not a social study, we are being indoctrinated to believe that all mathematics teaching must be taught through a social justice lens.
So the love for the children is what really makes you make these types of decisions about, is the traditional way of instructing what's best for them or not?
So right now, I'm learning how to push back and how to challenge kids to think for themselves. Questions like, did Rosa Parks plan her action on the Montgomery bus? So we looked at primary sources, we looked at secondary sources that were conflicting.
My mom was looking at a school for me to go to, and the population for whites was like really large, and the blacks were really small. I think one of the reasons they did that was because number one, they still think whites are better, and number two, because segregation is illegal and they still feel like whites are better, they want mainly white people, but having 1 or 2 black people and a couple Latino, it makes them seem like not totally white.
You will be missing out on the content which is meant to be learned, the content which made your parents wealthy enough to put you through college. Your grandchildren and your children will suffer under the system which is currently being built around you, which has not only taken over writing and social studies in, elementary education, but is rapidly taking over math, science, and every other aspect of education.
Yeah, resign. What? Resign.
I'm not resigning.
Okay.
If I owe an apology, I will deliver it.
Wait, hey.
You were highly accurate and often maligned and mocked.
Yep.
People didn't think it was a big deal. They think you're much ado about nothing. You're making a big deal about some kids that are voicing their opinions on things, but what you recognized early on was that there was an authoritarian aspect of it, a forced compliance aspect of it that's very dangerous.
What happens to Brett anymore. He can go and be racist and be a piece of shit wherever he wants to do that. Hopefully, long term, we can just weed out people like Brett.
Yeah, it's all about force. And, I've started to get calls in the last week or two. The people who mocked me and others, including you, for making too much of what appeared to be college kids going wild on college campuses. Some of them have started to call and say, I got it wrong. What do we do now? And actually, I appreciate those calls and those contacts, because really that is the question.
Yeah, what do we do now to pull it back?
Yeah.
How do you get the genie back in the bottle? Or as Douglas Murray says, how do you put the brakes on this thing?
How do you put the brakes on this thing, indeed? Well, I have to tell you, I'm not optimistic. I think that this is actually the people who are catching up to the fact that Evergreen has now spilled over into the world have not caught up to the fact that this is unstoppable at this point with the current configuration. The absence of leadership is going to prevent us from doing what we should do.
We need to recognize our privilege and practice humility.
And that means that the next set of predictions are far more dire.
Exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization.